As we handle the bumps and bruises of regular life or even special circumstances, we reach out for routines or even escapes at times to avoid or manage stress. But if we would just step back and look at our mindset and choose a positive mindset to activate our mind toward living life to the fullest, we get ever closer to the center of calmness. And good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Center of Calmness. And tonight we are super honored to have Mr. Ryan Stanley here with us. Welcome, Ryan.
DK, I'm blessed to be here, my friend. Thank you so much for having me.
Glad you're here. And as I understand it, you're calling in from New Jersey this evening. How are things up in Jersey at this time?
That's the word. Yeah, that's the word on the street. Things are well. We are wrapping up the summer. School is starting. We've still got a little bit of humidity in the air, but no, it's a great time to be alive. It's called the Garden State for a reason. So I love the change of season, even with the uniqueness of 2020. You can still step outside. You can still take in the scents and sounds of the change of season. So we're doing very well. Thank you for asking, man.
That's glad to hear. It sounds like overall, perhaps the stress level, which has been catastrophically bad, in my opinion, for quite some time, perhaps is finally starting to get closer to a level that's more realistic.
Yeah, you know what? I think that or just people are getting used to it or just adjusting. As humans, we do adapt, I think, more easily than most of us give ourselves as a race credit for. But I think we do adapt. And I think people are starting to get used to certain aspects of it. I think it also just, we got hit in New Jersey. We got hit so early, so hard coming right out of New York City that we were like pretty hardcore shut down, like right off the bat, like in April, like nobody was going anywhere. And so even now, just the fact that you have to wear masks anytime you go in stores and that type of a thing, it's so different. It feels almost more relaxed than it was, even though it's different as it may have been a year ago. But yeah, things are we're figuring it out slowly but surely. That's
awesome. And as we find solutions to bring folks closer to calmness, I was just intrigued by the work that you do and the coaching that you do. I wonder if you could give us just a brief introduction of who you have worked with in the past, who you typically work with now, and what you're doing these days.
Sure. Yeah. And thank you, by the way, for the opportunity. Again, blessed to be here. So I'm a certified professional coach. I have been since 2009. So I have over a decade of coaching. I initially started off coaching musicians and people in the music industry. In 2008, I ran an artist management company. So I managed a bunch of bands. And what I loved most about that was connecting with musicians, was empowering them to be better versions of themselves, was helping them see the big picture and move forward towards those dreams and approach their life from an entrepreneurial standpoint. A lot of people don't realize that musicians are entrepreneurs. And so knowing that's what I loved, I suddenly, in October of 2008, I heard the term life coach come up like 3 or 4 times in different conversations. And I said, that's more of what I am. I can do the managed business part, but I really love the connection, like the empowerment, and that's where I'm on fire, and that's where I can light people up as well. And so certified in 2009, I spent the first 5 or 6 years really focusing on musicians and people in the music industry. And then I was trained at an organization called IPEC, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. They are one of the, if not the top coach training organization in the world. And they actually hired me during my training. They asked me to come in. I helped them with some marketing off the bat, and I helped them with some sales. But about 5 years later, I also became their first ever internal coach. So I coached all of their staff. I coached people from entry level all the way up to the C-suite. And then so with that, I was able to recognize my ability to coach outside the music industry and recognize that I really could serve a lot of other people if I decided to step into it. So since then, I've worked with doctors, I've worked with authors, I've worked with people in marketing, I've worked with entrepreneurs on all levels. Really anyone who is really recognizing that they have blocks, they have fears, they have limiting beliefs, or maybe they're not even recognizing that, they just recognize that they're stuck and they're in a rut and they're not really living up to their potential. And that can be physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. They know that they have more potential to be more of who they'd like to be, and they're just not able to do it on their own, which makes perfect sense based on their life up until that moment. And that's why coaching works. But yeah, next to parenthood, coaching is the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. I will absolutely do it on some level for the rest of my life.
That's completely awesome. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that you mentioned. The first being that your initial work with musicians, not so much on the business side, but on the coaching and personal empowerment side. What
Yeah.
did you find unique about the musicians that you work with that, say, is different from your corporate types or your regular marketers and authors and other business people? What did you find about musicians that made them special, and that also were special needs for them as far as the angles that you had to take when you were coaching with them to get them to move forward?
So, yeah, great question. So initially they're obviously they tend to be more creative. They tend to be a little bit more interesting backgrounds and lifestyles and schedules, and their history is always a little bit unique. Their passion is always clear, right? That's why they're stepping into this. So I think from a unique standpoint, I think that's what was unique about it. What a lot of people don't realize, I mean, it's kind of sounds kind of obvious after I say it, but what a lot of people don't realize is that musicians are entrepreneurs. Like, they are creating a product that they want to sell to the masses. And so, people say most businesses fail within the first year, first 2 years, whatever. So being a musician is no different in the sense that it's not an easy industry to get into. And so to have somebody, often, it's funny, this kind of will answer your question as well. They would typically come to me with things like, hey, I want to get more gigs. I want to get more followers in social media. I want to get an album made, like very left brains, tactical and skills. And I would say, okay, we can definitely work on those. But really, by the end of the first call, we had really shifted direction. We're first going to dive into who are you? What are your fears? What are your blocks? What are your living beliefs? More specifically, what's your internal dialogue like? What are you saying to yourself on a regular basis? What's your faith in the outcome that you desire? Do you believe that you're able to accomplish this? How big are we shooting here? And so really help them, because a lot of the time, musicians or anybody for that matter, don't make the time to think about the details. And they just say, well, I want to be rich, or I want to be famous, or I want to, sell 1 million albums. It's like, okay, cool. Like, that's great, but that's broad. Like, let's dial it down. Who do you want to be in the next 3 months? Right. And then they're like, oh, I don't know. I've just been kind of striving for this giant goal. So really, to be able to dial them back is a lot of fun, and help them ask them questions that nobody else had really asked them before, and come from a unique place as an entrepreneur and as a fan of music and as a coach. We're able to have some pretty powerful conversations.
That's really neat. And so did you find that by giving them or helping them develop internally their own stepwise plan, where they perhaps put some milestones in between where they were in that super goal, along with some elimination of roadblocks, did you find that fairly effective and a fairly unique approach, given that they were musicians to start with and have a little bit different goals and approach and creative expression level than say others do?
When it comes down to it, the shorter answer is no, in the sense that we're all human, right? We all have fears that really keep us small. We all typically, sometimes from musicians, they're putting themselves out there on a major way, like all the time, right? So there's a different level of what they could be fearful of, but that not even be true, in the sense that sometimes, everybody's afraid to speak up in a conversation at a party or whatever, or I'm afraid what somebody says in my family. So we all have deep fears of what other people think about us. Musicians are just putting themselves out there more often intentionally, so that setting them up for success is a lot of fun. But I wouldn't say it's too different from any of my other clients, because everybody shows up with their fears and again with their blocks. And as a coach, by the way, I'm not coming in and saying I live a perfect life, and if you do everything I've done, you're also going to have a perfect life. Right. I'm really helping the clients recognize that they have the answers within. Again, they're just blocked by their fears, and they're blocked by their life's experience up until now, what they maybe some limiting beliefs, things that aren't necessarily true, but they've been telling themselves, or their parents told them, or their friends have been telling them, or whatever. And so as a coach, I come in and I say, how true is that? Which is a question they typically don't ask themselves, right? It's like, oh, I guess it's true. Why wouldn't it be? And then we can dive deeper into it. And when they start to realize, how powerful their own self is, and how their own intention can be, and their own purpose can be, by stepping into it on a daily basis, it can be a pretty powerful experience.
That's really neat. I appreciate the similarities and commonness that we all share as far as those limiting beliefs go. And we all have, like you said, musicians are out there, but we all have goals that we're shooting for, even if they're not quite as visible as their stage presence. Yeah, absolutely. That's great. I did want to ask if perhaps you could contrast that experience working with musicians with working on the insides of a coaching organization, which, from looking from the outside, that seems like it would be completely different. But I wonder if you found a lot of those similarities working internally all the way up and down the chain of the coaching organization that you were part of.
Yeah, I think so. Both. to say contrast. I mean, both in the sense that there were a lot of similarities. Again, you are connecting on people's fears, but really more specifically, when I would work with my musicians, that their day to day, their 9 to 5 wasn't the same as the people who was in 9 to 5 in a corporate setting or working at IPEC, right? So at IPEC, I knew exactly what their 9 to 5 was like. I knew the people they were interacting with personally because I worked there myself. And I knew what some of their challenges hours a week when I wasn't just coaching them, right? So it was kind of a different experience. I knew, and if they had a challenge with somebody within the company for whatever reason, I understood from an empathetic level exactly where that might have been coming from, and I knew what the relationship was between the two. So when you get to that dynamic where you know a larger group of everybody involved within a corporate setting, and you know what the family dynamic is of the organization, and you know how people interact with each other, you're going to have a different perspective and be able to approach things a little bit differently, as opposed to a musician might tell me about his, the guy at the guy who heads up the venue that he didn't want to play at, or, somebody, a booking agent somewhere, or just their parents, or even people in their band who I haven't necessarily met before. It is more of like just a one-on-one where I really have to dive in and be even more curious, actually, as to what their life is, to get them to really come out and describe it to me so that I can reflect it back to them appropriately, and really so I'm able to hold their agenda. So that's the first thing that comes to mind as far as the difference. I think, again, the similarities are going to be, we all have fears. We all have limiting beliefs about ourselves. But the differences are going to be just the types of conversations and really what we'd be working on. Sometimes in the corporate setting, I might spend an hour with somebody and we didn't talk about work at all. Like, it was really mostly just about that personal stuff. And so I guess this is a similarity, and the same thing with my musicians.
Sure. Understand.
While, 60 to 70% of them are going to be a lot about what they're doing in their art and in their craft and in building their business, sometimes 30% of a call will be just about their mom. Or, feeling that they're never going to make it in this industry, and now it's all difficult, and, whatever, all these different reasons. And then sometimes, depending on what's going on in their personal life, that I will do, there'll be a whole session that's about their personal life. It's really, I think that's one of the things I love about being a coach is and that's why coaching works, is I am literally holding the client's agenda. And often when we have friends, we have family, we have other people who we could potentially go to for guidance, they have their own agenda. And sometimes that agenda is they love us. It's not necessarily a bad thing to have their own agenda, but they're showing up with their own agenda. A lot of the time that can be their own fears. A lot of the time it can be that they love us and don't want to see us get hurt, whenever hurt means to them, not us. And so as a coach, I come in and I really get crystal clear on what my client's agenda is. And so we're constantly, both of us, back and forth working only on that. And I don't care what their mom says, and I don't care what their friends say, because it has nothing to do with me or anything. All I care about is how are we moving you personally, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally towards your agenda that you've spoken about and kind of laid out.
That's really absolutely great. I did want to ask also about when you're working with coaches, or you're working internally with coaches inside of a coaching organization, maybe not so much executives, which perhaps have more of a traditional corporate job,
Sure.
But coaches. Do you find coaches are taking more stress from just their personal circumstance? Are they taking more stress from the corporate structure that they're a part of, or are they perhaps absorbing some stress from the folks, the clients that they coach?
That's a great question. So for the most part, the unique thing about this answer is that we are all, I already used the word unique, but we are all so unique, and everybody is on such a unique journey. Yes. And so it's almost to say that everybody is, to say all, and I know this wasn't what you're asking, but I'm just thinking out loud, to say that all coaches are one way, right, compared to all coaches in a corporate setting or another. I know that's not what you're asking specifically, but it really, everybody is so unique, and everybody has unique niches. And so I would say for the most part, coaches that I've worked with, they're never stressed about their client stuff. I don't think that's something, I think if a coach is trained appropriately, they are really so focused on the client that it's not making it about them at all anyway, right? And they're not really taking on that energy. A lot of the time, coaches are rescuers. We are people pleasers. We do want to kind of swoop in and save everybody. And if you're doing that, you're actually probably might take on some more energy and stress from your clients than I'd recommend. But coaching, as I mentioned earlier, isn't necessarily doing that. It's really, it's the only way you're saving other people is by allowing them to save themselves and empowering them to do that. So from my experience, question, I don't think coaches, I think if coaches are done rightly, and I can speak from my own experience, I don't really take on people's stress ever. But the interesting thing about that as well is because coaches are often people pleasers and do want to save everybody, they are very concerned about what other people think. So they'll go ahead and guide somebody, a client, through all this, that, and the other thing. And then when it comes down to their own life, they'll have those same challenges and those same limiting beliefs, and they're not able to get past them, again, because we're all human.
Right, of
So
course.
the nice part is, as a coach, it's a little bit easier for me to come in and say, well, this, right? I'm like, yeah, I know. So at least we're kind of speaking the same language, and it's easier to kind of dive into. But everybody's got a unique journey, and it is an adventure, and people have sickness in their life, and they have stressful family in their life, and it doesn't matter. Again, me going back to, even though I'm a coach, I'm not necessarily, doesn't mean I've got my whole life figured out and everything is perfect, and I never have a stressful day or a bad day. It does just, I hope anybody I can speak for IPEC graduates, I've got the tools to utilize for myself, and I do coach myself often. Even just today, we spoke a little bit about before the call started, but I was running super late. My phone literally just broke today, and I was like, I had to go there, and then I couldn't transfer any of my contact. Like, it was a stressful moment. I was like, oh my gosh, like, I was able to take a moment and coach myself around the silly stress that was happening to me. And when we're able to do that more and more often, we build up that habit of presence, of calmness, of clarity, of curiosity, as opposed to being at the effective life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as we were discussing earlier, I had a similar experience on the way back through a traffic jam and running a bit late. And I had to apply my own calmness techniques, not so much from a coaching aspect, but from my own mind body mastery aspect that I apply personally. I'd be happy to share with you at some point. But just to move a little bit farther down the road, it looks like you've written a book about 2018, a couple of years ago. Was that right?
2019, last July it came out.
Okay, last July.
Actually, it's ironic. I didn't put a ton of time into marketing it. It's a quick book. I kind of just put it out to friends and family, sold about 200 to 300 copies, just kind of locally, and people on Facebook and that type of a thing. And then COVID came. And now so the title of the book is called Be Patient, Be Present, Be Joyful, a first aid kit for the emotional bumps, scrapes, and bruises of life. And it is literally just that. It's literally something, if you're having a stressful moment, you're feeling overwhelmed, you're feeling anxiety, something that you can pick up. So I actually made it with two purposes. One, that you can read straight through it. And first of all, it's not very long. It was intentionally made to be short. You could probably read it in about 35 minutes. It's maybe 70 pages, 78 pages or something like that. I'm not a reader. There are some amazing books out there that will absolutely change your life. I just probably will not finish most of them. And I know that about myself, right? And working as a coach for over 10 years, I've seen some basic, and I don't mean that in a belittling sense at all. I mean that for myself, for my family, for others, clients as well. Some basic challenges in patience, in presence, in joy, like these basic things that if we learn to create within our lives on any given moment, we can really start to have a more fulfilling and enjoyable life. And so I was finding myself just having these same kind of conversations over and over again with my clients. I was like, well, if I could just put this into something that people could carry around with them. In fact, I have a copy right here. I mean, it's handheld. It's something you can put in your back pocket. It's something you can carry in your purse. It's something that you can put in your glove compartment of your car. And at any moment, if you're having stress, you can pick it up. And so two parts I started. The first part is you can read straight through it. Definitely have some tangible things to walk away with immediately. But then secondly, you can it's designed as a first aid kit to where if you don't have time to read at all, but you just need something in the minute, you can literally open it to any page. And there's intentionally something either highlighted or just huge on the page that you can't miss it to serve you in that moment and to bring you back to now and to help you to decide who you want to be so that you can live more fulfilling in the moment and serve others while you do the same.
That's super cool. I actually picked up a copy before our session here today just to have a look. Now, I made the mistake of picking it up on my Kindle, right, which is probably not as visceral of an experience as picking up the paper.
I'm going to send you a copy after this anyway, DK.
Oh, I really appreciate that. But what I really enjoyed, along with, of course, like you said, it's a very short, readable, it's easily accessible content. I like two things right off the bat. The first being the word pictures, the illustrations you have, and they're huge and very insightful just to have those laid out. And then, like you said, the aspect of creation and really from a mindset shift perspective, before we even get into the patience and the joyfulness and the other attribute that we were talking about, just the fundamental exercise of thinking ourselves as creators. That's such a huge shift. Most of the time, I think we think of ourselves as responders, that we're just here running through life and reacting the best we can. But if we see ourselves as having a much more active role, that's so huge. So I did want to ask quickly, how did you pick the three key attributes that you chose and only to focus on those three attributes for this particular book?
I wish I had a great answer for you because it is a great question. And the truth is, I think there was just things that were coming up for me. I think it was just really, it wasn't, I don't even remember a particular moment. In fact, actually I can, and I have it here around here somewhere. I literally just wrote down on a sticky note, and that's all it said. It said, be patient, be present, be joyful. Like that was it. I wrote it down on a sticky note, and that was just kind of where it started. I don't remember when specifically. I just know that I had it on my desk for a while. Like I have a book idea. Like it feels like just this some basic concepts. I think I hadn't even come out with the first aid kit part of it. It was just some basic stuff. Listen, man, everybody, if they can learn to be patient, if they can learn to be present, if they can learn to be joyful, what else do you really need, right? In the grand scheme of things, if you're here now and you're joyful about it, and you're not waiting on anything, and you're not thinking about what someone else somewhere else thinks, and you're not, thinking about the past, and you're not worried about the future, patience, presence, and joy are really all you need. I mean, obviously we need food, but
Right.
other than that, I mean, oxygen, sunlight, gravity, it's all here for us every single day and in every single moment. And so to your perfect point, so many of us have been programmed to feel like life is happening to us, and we're constantly preparing for the worst case scenario and reacting to life and thinking that we have to be reacting to life and then resting and that's it until it happens again. When really the truth is life is happening for us. Again, going back to this concept that when you wake up in the morning, there is oxygen, there is gravity, there is sunlight, there is water, all here so that you can exist. What are you doing with it, right? What are we doing with it? How am I taking that? How am I not taking that for granted? How am I literally recognizing that, there's only now. So here I am right now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, because that stuff doesn't really exist. It's just kind of in our mind. The history is just previous nows that we remember, sort of, and typically we actually remember them wrong, right? I think 60% of our memories are incorrect. So we mold them to kind of adjust to our story that we were telling ourselves about our history. And that's why we are the way we are. And that's why things happen to me the way they do happen to me, as opposed to getting clarity and deciding that, life doesn't happen to me. It's literally happening for me. And if we take this concept and start utilizing, in fact, even today, I go back just to such a basic example. How can this be happening for me with my phone breaking, all these different things? And I don't necessarily know the answer, but at the same time, it made me understand, okay, it doesn't matter necessarily what the answer is. The fact is that it is happening for me. And when we start to get more curious and stop taking away that feeling of this is happening to me, this is happening to me, what do I do now? And this is my story. And because this happened to me 10 years ago, I'm this way now, as opposed to I am this way now, no matter what. This is who I am today. And being curious, who do I want to be? What do I want tomorrow to look like? And without going into, well, I can't because this, I can't because I didn't ask what you can't because. What do you want? I'm talking to myself. What do you want tomorrow to be? And it becomes a pretty powerful statement. And so when we start to create patience and we start to create presence intentionally, and we start to create joy intentionally, and then there's an epilogue, which is keep going, right? On your worst day and on your best day, keep going. If you utilize those two words and that this is your mission, this is your purpose, it can be whatever you want to. The only way you get off your purpose is to not keep going. So keep going with presence, with patience, with joy as often as possible. Be the light that you want to see in the world at the same time, and you can't go wrong.
Right. Patience, presence, and joy. Yeah, it's definitely, the more you reflect on it, the more complete I think that mindset is. Like, as you said, in the present moment, which is really all that exists for us anyway, right?
Yeah. And
that's
going
awesome.
back to, and so, the prologue, that's it. So there's a prologue, you are a creator, and it gets into those details. And real quick, I'll just kind of, for the listeners out there,
Sure.
when we say you are a creator, it's like, right now you and I are creating an awesome podcast, right? And if you wake up in the morning and you put on blue socks, blue pants, blue shirt, blue hat, you are creating a human being dressed in blue. Mm-hmm. You could take 2 pieces of bread and you put peanut butter on one side, jelly on the other, you put them together, you've created a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I know this sounds obvious, but bear with me because it's important to recognize, okay, yes, that makes sense. Of course, we're creating this. We create music, we create art, we create, you put a bunch of words on a paper and you put a sentence at the end, you create a sentence, a period at the end. But we also create laughter, but we also create sadness, and we create anger, and we create frustration, and we create anxiety. And that's not bad. I'm not judging anybody out there. I'm not saying you should never do that. You should never feel this way. I am just saying it's important for us to recognize that it is coming from within and that we are creating it, whether we like it or not. It's based on circumstance, but we are creating it. And when you start to step into that concept and you say, okay, right now, I'm late. I hope it's okay, because I've used this example many times myself, but I'm going to use your example of being late today, right?
Yeah.
You are creating a person who's being impatient, and it's valid and it makes sense. But in that moment, you can say to yourself, so chapter 1 says, okay, so you can say, what would it be like to create a person who is patient? right? If I'm genuinely being curious, instead of judging myself as good or bad or late or angry or whatever, I can just stop and I can just say, I'm feeling impatient. I'm clearly creating some impatience right now. What would it
Right.
be like? How does patience feel? How would I feel if I created patience? Or if I know somebody else who I recognize as patient, I can say, how would they behave in this moment? How could I create that? And
Sure.
even just by stopping to ask yourself, what does patience feel like? What would it be like to create patience? You're actually, in effect, creating patience because you're no longer worried about the future. You're not worried about being stressful anymore. So it's an
Right.
opportunity to utilize curiosity and recognize that you have the ability to create in every moment.
That is awesome. Yeah, in a way, clarifying the problem, if you will. In my case, it was being in the traffic jam and wondering when it was going to clear and whether I could make it here for
Yeah.
this time. I could have at that moment, and I actually did progress through certain exercises to get closer to what you're talking about, where I said, well, yeah, right now I'm definitely revving up, but I could choose, and I did choose to rev back down and ended up I mean, it wasn't perfect, but it was certainly a lot better than it could have been.
Well, and so this, for anybody else out there, I had like one of my biggest aha moments was sitting in traffic in a very similar situation, and I was late for something that was important to me. I was actually meeting somebody who was really important. The first time I was actually meeting them, and I was going to New York City, and I was in this pretty heavy traffic, and I was getting all worked up and stressed up. And then I said, "Wait a second!" And I literally thought about the last 15 times that I was late for something and that I was stressed about it. I was sitting in the car, very similar situation. And I think like 14 out of the 15, but when I got there, it didn't make a difference that I was 12 minutes late. And the
Awesome.
evening went on exactly as it was supposed to. The other people might have were a little bit late too in certain situations. They didn't know, they didn't care, it didn't matter, whatever. Like we put up all this energy, we're creating, when we have a thought, we are creating energy, right? I mean, you can measure people's brainwaves. There's alpha waves, there's beta waves, there's theta waves. So you literally,
Absolutely.
when you have a thought, you are creating energy. And your body then physically responds to those thoughts with more energy by creating different chemicals and the way your heart beats and the way your cortisol, all these different things are released to prepare you for the stress that you're worried about. And you do that after a while and your body just starts to build up and you become tense. So you could spend that exact same amount of time. Also, you're going to be creating something anyway, right? You're creating a person who's angry and impatient and worried, or you can recognize that you're creating something and use that exact same amount of time and that exact same amount of energy, if not more intentionally, if you want to, in creating joy and creating love and creating gratitude and compassion and, for anything you want. Gratitude just for the fact that you have a car that you can be stuck in.
Exactly. Gratitude that I still have an excellent chance of making it here even if not on a perfect time frame, a reasonable time frame.
Well, and here we are, by the way. And so you were late, I was late, but it ended up being perfect. We started right on time for the audience to see. And so like any energy that you and I might have had getting here didn't serve the outcome because the outcome worked out exactly as it was supposed to.
Exactly.
So in that moment for us to say, listen, I'm just grateful that I get to do this and I get to share my message and I get to connect with people all over the world, that I live in a time where I could just be late for something and hit a couple buttons. And now, I could be seen by the world if I wanted to.
Exactly.
Connect and make new friends and connect with new people. I mean, it's all a gift.
Right. So huge. Right. And like you said, a product of creation, many steps of creation stacked upon on top of one another. That's awesome. I did want to flash up your contact information. You had mentioned that your links are all at ryanstanley.com. So I did want to put that up there for the video viewers to see. And as well, call it out for our audio audience later on. And I just wanted to ask quickly, Ryan, for folks that might be interested in working with you, who would you say are your perfect clients that really fit your messaging and approach the best?
Yeah, and thanks for asking that. So I would say my perfect client is somebody who is willing to do the work, who recognizes that they are not where they want to be and they have not reached their potential, and they are willing to show up physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally to do the right things. And it's not something that's going to happen in a day, a week, a month, a year. I mean, I have some pretty powerful first sessions. I'm not going to lie. Many people do get a lot out of like that because it is such a different way to be. And you are getting asked questions you hadn't thought, to ask yourself before.
Absolutely. It's very challenging, right?
Yeah. But, somebody who has had enough, they've had enough with their old self and they're willing to show up on purpose to bring out the new self. And they know that they deserve it and they're not going to let anything get in the way. And I will be the person to guide you and walk you through the whole thing and celebrate when we get there.
All right. Well, I would direct anyone interested to visit ryanstanley.com. to hear more from Ryan and perhaps explore a working relationship, a coaching relationship with him. So that'd be great. Ryan, I did want to thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, if I could, I know we're up on time, but just
Please.
real quick, if I could say, if you go to ryanstanley.com, also, if you wanted to buy a copy of my book from that website, it's on Amazon and it's on Barnes and Nobles, wherever books are sold. But if you go to ryanstanley.com and you purchase a book from there, there's a button that says, "Be patient, be present, be joyful." If you click on that, you buy the book from there. Obviously, you'll get a signed copy. It'll come directly from me with a little note, but also comes with a complimentary coaching session, depending on my availability. So if you know. Yeah. So if you have heard this today and it's something that feels good for you, feel free to reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Okay, great. Well, I definitely recommend everyone in the audience to take that path to purchase the book, ryanstanley.com, with the free coaching session, which is of course tremendous value. And again, Ryan, I know I already said this, but thanks so much for joining us here this evening.
Truly my pleasure, DK. Thanks for having me, man.
I appreciate it, Ryan. And for the Center of Calmness, I'm DK Warner.